Welcome, everybody. This is the Rotary Club of Silicon Valley, and every week we are working to bring you people from all over the world who are making the lives of others better locally, digitally, globally. And the goal is to do that in such a way that it inspires you to think about service. Service is the focus of Rotary International, the organization for which the Rotary Club of Silicon Valley is one club. There are 1.4 million Rotarians and Rotaractors out there, and thousands of clubs doing all sorts of projects around the world. And there are all kinds of ways that these projects happen. Careful planning, total accident. And we're going to hear today from a speaker who discovered that she had something huge to give, and it's a story that I think you will really enjoy. So with that, Wendy, how wonderful it is to have you with us.
Oh, thanks.
I'd like you to tell us, about Pearls with Purpose and how you got to what you do. Welcome.
Well, thank you. All right, I'll just jump right in, and that will give you all the answers you may be seeking. My youngest daughter, Jerica, loved dresses, and at the age of 6, she was asked to be a flower girl in a wedding. It was her cousin's wedding. She was given a beautiful purple dress to wear, which she absolutely loved. And of course, what she did, which is what all little girls do, is she outgrew it over time. Running a nonprofit, I just encouraged her to donate it to somebody that might benefit from it. So she reluctantly agreed, and off that dress went to the Philippines in a container. And this is a very perfect example of a handout. We're all aware of the hundreds of thousands of humanitarian aid and assistance that is provided in developing countries for needs to be met at a basic level. This is an impact for thousands, hundreds of thousands of people in developing parts of the world during times of need. Maslow's hierarchy of needs dictates that until an individual's needs around clothing, food, and shelter are met, they can't aspire upwards towards education, training, service to others, and self-actualization because they're too cold, hungry, or exposed to the elements. So day-to-day survival is simply their greatest feat. Handout models have been demonstrated and replicated through many successful organizations. Tom's Shoes, Malawi's Pizza, even Stevens, and hundreds of others. Building on the handout model in the early 2000s, a new advancement in humanitarian development came along. It was Muhammad Yunus, and it was simply called microcredit, or what I like to call a hand up. Focused on giving a hand up rather than a handout, Muhammad Yunus introduced the Grameen Bank concept. He issued tiny amounts of credit called microloans to more than 16 million people, with his goal being nothing less than the elimination of poverty worldwide. This is different than a handout because it gives something to somebody with the repercussion of, if you don't pay it back or give back, nothing will move forward. You, yourself, the project, the loan, the money would get exhausted. Another example of this is Potters for Peace. I don't know how familiar many Rotarians are with Potters for Peace. I teamed up with them in Thailand. And what they did is they developed a pottery manufacturing plant. And this manufacturing plant witnessed firsthand the difference between a hand up and a handout model. When it originated, it gave out ceramic bowls, which were colloidal silver lined. This purified water that was simply poured in. The goal was to create safe drinking water at a minimal expense. They went into dozens of villages, handed out the clay bowls. These clay bowls sat on top of a plastic 5-gallon bucket. And when water came in, purified water came out because of that colloidal silver lining. But what happened is within a few weeks, arguments and riots broke out in the villages. The first things they laid their hands on were these colloidal silver-lined pots, which they threw at other villagers in an angry rant. They were tossed about, shards and broken fragments were found throughout the streets in many of the villages. The Potters for Peace movement had no idea why this would happen. How could something as valuable as purifying your water be destroyed simply because of anger? So they went back to the drawing board. They started to charge $3 per bowl. Now these bowls had value, and with that value came demand. But the villagers couldn't afford it because they earned 50 cents a day. So Potters for Peace sweetened the deal. They taught the villagers how to be potters. Now there was sweat equity. The villagers were learning a trade, a skill, they were invested, and they had actually created a product, and it was a product they needed. This product provided the solution of clean water. The potters had pride. They were solving their own drinking water problem with a simple, cost-effective solution. Some of the villagers even partnered with Potters for Peace, and they built manufacturing plants, which enabled them to employ other villagers. This created jobs. From that point forward, broken bowls, fragments were never found in the streets again. What is different in this scenario? It's called dignity. The villagers had purpose and had created their own dignity. They no longer had to rely on a handout. They had a combination of a handout with a hand up. This is very similar to Kiva. Kiva envisions a world where all people hold the power to create opportunity for themselves and others. It's very similar to Rotarians. Rotarians exist with a common goal to simply make a difference in the lives of others, working wonders for humanity nationwide. Rotarians have been an impact on the world over. And this is where my story comes in. Pearls with Purpose. On our YouTube channel, you can watch what we do in a short 2-minute video. But basically, for the last 20 years, I have been teaching disadvantaged individuals and women rescued from sex trafficking who are located in developing countries how to live their lives in the upper levels of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I've taught them with education, helped them accelerate into self-actualization, and walked them and mentored them through contribution to others. We all know that innovation means nothing unless it sparks something. Impact means nothing unless it changes something, and sacrifice means nothing unless it creates something. As we are all coming out of a global pandemic, the world has changed as we have all experienced greater fatigue, uncertainty, anxiety, and even a rise in mental illness. So how do we afford the opportunity to actually create dignity? How do we move forward? How do we continue in our quest as Rotarians and human beings to be change makers in the world today? Through my travels to the Philippines, India, Cambodia, Thailand, Kenya, Peru, I have uncovered a drive that exists within all of humanity. Whether there's actually 6, but we only have time to address a few of them. The first is the need for a woman to invest and create her own dignity for herself. This is manifested for her through long-term self-reliance, meaning to do this successfully, she needs to be able to market and move products that she creates outside of her village. But we couldn't start there because in the beginning, all of the women I've now worked with to date were in the lower levels and lower foundation of Maslow's hierarchy. They were lacking food, clothing, and shelter. So we did begin with a handout. We began with container shipments that carried things like the purple dress my daughter donated, the basic fundamental needs of food, clothing, education. In fact, we've shipped over 260 tons of clothing, food, educational, medical, and hygiene items to over 40 provinces since 2001. Only then were we able to drive towards the internal dignity within. And this is how Pearls with Purpose addresses poverty with a hand up. As the on-the-ground trainer of more than 480 women, what I have learned and witnessed firsthand through my training is that women do desire to contribute back to themselves, to their families, to their communities, no matter what their culture, ethnicity, or education is. The desire for possibility and purpose are not gender biased. They are not limited because of race, culture, poverty level, or the location of where an individual lives, because they exist within every single human being. We all strive to want to do more, be more, and give more. Our unique spin on microenterprise is that we layered it with import. We layered it with values training and mentorship and education. By importing the products that the women create in developing countries, we were actually able to address their internal needs of the character of poverty-stricken individuals and break the generational cycle of poverty. On my last trip to the Philippines, I was meeting with a group of young adults. They were nicely dressed. I didn't recognize very many of them, but they interacted with me as though they knew me. I couldn't place their names at all. And so I said, "Remind me what your name is." And they said, "Oh, I'm Irish. I'm Janet's daughter." "Oh, I'm Jezreel. I'm Maybelline's daughter." "Oh, my name is Welbin, daughter of Nanette." "Because you trained our mom? We went to school. We graduated college. I married. We built a house. I went to high school." This has taught me that over the course of an entire generation, the cycle of poverty was eliminated. What I've seen over the past 2 decades demonstrates that women with incredible skills and able to create beautiful items need the ability to move their products to a socially minded shopper on a regular basis so that they can experience and maintain long-term self-reliance. This, along with education, is the key to breaking poverty, because dignity is food, clothing, and shelter. Dignity is teaching a trade. And dignity is also striving towards self-actualization, knowing that you are contributing not only to yourself and your family, but your community and the world at large. Most importantly, dignity is serving humanity from the heart. When I train with the women in the developing countries, they will say to me, "The women in America like my necklace, they wear my earrings, she wear my bracelet," and their heads lift higher. Their smile grows wider as they realize they have done something for someone they will never meet, and it was of worth. I see from the depths of their eyes the dignity they now have. Or, in the words of Desi Amal, "My whole life, I was told I was nothing. I could be nothing. I have leprosy. I am missing my limbs. I am useless. I spend day after day just sitting and watching. And then I hear jewelry making. I came, you teach. Now I learn, I can do. My husband, he take pity. He have leprosy too. He only work when people feel sorry. He say to me, yes, you try this, I do. He's so happy for me. And now I am something. I can do something. I feel again, I have a skill." This is Desi Amal pictured here. She has only the knuckles of her hands on her right hand, and she would literally take her knuckles and piece together the pearls and string them. It took her 4 hours to make the necklace she's holding. So how do we change lives when the world is on tilt? There's an old Chinese proverb that states, if you want happiness for an hour, take a nap. If you want it for a day, go fishing. If you want it for a year, inherit a fortune. But if you want it for a lifetime, help somebody every day. Many of you here today have consistently been involved in helping somebody else, and you know how being involved in changing lives changes lives. So that's what I did 20 years ago. As a mom to 5 kids under the age of 12, I was floundering. Maybe some people can relate, because over the course of a decade, I had been pregnant for 45 months, not straight. I had nursed over 60 months. I had assembled over 6,323 lunches, done over 9,642 loads of laundry, and done 8,740 loads of dishes. These are not my actual kids. I had toilet trained and listened to toddler babble for over a decade, and I had simply lost my identity. In an effort to help me through this crisis, my husband said, "You're a certified gemologist. Go make jewelry, sell it at a Saturday's market." I wasn't looking to start a nonprofit. I wasn't looking to change the world. I wasn't even looking for purpose. But purpose for me at that point in time was my family. I was simply looking for something to do that wasn't toilet training, that wasn't toddler babble. Yet purpose found me in the body of an email from a stranger in the Philippines. This was done in AOL dial-up internet days. This was not a simple task. It was expensive to travel to the internet cafes. It was very unreliable to have data. I had no idea where the Philippines was. Yet when I sent out 20 miscellaneous emails to 20 made-up email addresses, one live human being located in remote province in the Philippines received an email from an American stranger. And in the body of her response to me inquiring over whether or not I could import loose pearls from her, she simply stated, "If you import finished pieces from me rather than loose pearls, you'll change women's lives in my country." And I couldn't get that sentence out of my mind. So what did I do? I simply said yes, and I worked it backwards from there. Because, like each of you, I have a family. These are my real kids. Today, they are 24 to 33 years of age. And yet, one of them has been diagnosed with bipolar and recently had a psychotic break. One of them was given 90 days to live at the age of 12. One of them is transgendering. One of them had a husband who was deployed in Dubai, and she had to raise 5 children as a single parent, 3 of whom were not hers. Yet she chose to graduate from college during that time with support from family. 2 of them had to move home during the pandemic. And then in 2015, 2 separate individuals chose to run a red light at an intersection, totaling my car, my spine, and my body. I am half titanium, and I am not faster or stronger, which I feel like is a ripoff. I have had to have 51 surgeries over the course of the last 12 years. And despite the surgeries and despite the obstacles, I have chosen to address life with what I say Viktor Frankl says. I have a choice, and I choose to not look at life as though it is an obstacle or a challenge, but to choose to see that I can control what I am going to output into the world. So even though I hiked Machu Picchu 10 weeks after dual artificial hip replacement, I did collapse at the end and fell asleep at their little lodge on a wooden board. Regardless of what life gave to me, I knew that my choice is what would impact for the greatest degree. I learned that tough times don't last, but tough people do. None of us are without similar challenges. So how do we do it? For me, I did it with a bike. The first car accident in 2015, I had applied for a race called Lotaja. This is a 206-mile one-day race that goes from Logan, Utah to Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Frustrated that I had just been hit by a car, unable to participate in the race, I had a biker friend who said to me, "Wendy, go buy a new bike." What would I do with a new bike? I asked him. He said, "You're going to put it at the foot of your bed and look at it every day for the next 12 weeks during recovery. And you're simply going to say to yourself, in 12 weeks, I'm going to ride this bike. 10 weeks, 5 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 days, 2 days, 1 day." October 21st, I had repeated to myself every morning, I am going to ride this bike. That day arrived with a couple inches of snow, but I chose to get out of bed and ride my bike. It was only a few miles, but I did what I said I was going to do. That taught me the power of my mind, the power that what I focus on is far greater than what happens to me, because it is our habits that will ground us during a time of crisis. So I choose to smile, I choose to live, I choose to fight, and I choose to give. Some people call it mortality motivation. I simply call it choice. I call it living my life congruent with what brings me the greatest joy. It is an alignment with my core values that keep me full of joy and full of purpose. I have witnessed so many trials of individuals that I know firsthand what really does bring happiness. I know what it's like to have things taken away, and I know what it's like to push through and fight for those things that are most important. This is Padma, and this is a true story of how an individual can be converted and create her own dignity. Padma arrived at our co-op not understanding any of the principles we taught. She was constantly handing the jewelry to the women on the left and the women on the right. She was refusing to participate in any of the activities. We dismissed her day after day after day, and day after day after day, she came back. And every time she came back, I told the translator, she's not doing the work. Her pieces would never sell in America. She doesn't listen. She doesn't participate. We need to dismiss her from the program. Finally, after 2 weeks, the translator explained to Padma fervently, please don't come back. And her lady sitting next to her said, Wendy, Please don't dismiss her. She needs this more than any of us. Concerned, I said, she isn't doing the program. And they said, that's because she's deaf. She can't hear you. Then I understood. This is the type of woman we're looking for. We do biographical information on all of the women we train. During her interview, thinking she must have been deaf as a little girl, I asked her if she knew sign language, if she understood language at all. And she said to me, when I was 11, I had to have open heart surgery. My family was in the upper caste. I lived in the city. The surgery left a scar from my neck to my belly. I was cast away from school, told I was untouchable, and forced to live in the leprosy colony, removed from my mother, removed from my father. I was untouchable. I was disfigured. In the leprosy colony, when I turned 14, I was forced to marry a man with leprosy. He was an alcoholic. Every day, every weekend, he would beat me. 4 years ago, he beat me so hard, I found I could not hear through my ears any longer. This is Padma today. Do you see the difference? Do you see her dignity? Do you see the smile and the pride from knowing she has created something with her own hands? This is how dignity is created, when an individual is given hope, promise, compassion, unconditional love, and education, when an individual is given mentorship, when they are no longer cast into a category, but told they can enjoy and embrace any possibility they desire. We need to be intentional. This is something I'll skip, but this is a trip that my kids and I took when we lived in India for 6 months. The question that my son asked of me was, Mom, if God were to really exist, then why is there so much harm and poverty? Why are so many people suffering? And I didn't have an answer for him. It took me 2 years of pondering his question, of wondering why the world had so much struggle and suffering in it, before I finally saw this video. This is a blind man begging in a street in Europe. He has a sign that simply says, I'm blind, please help me. Nobody donates, nobody drops coins. And then a woman walks up and she grabs his sign and she rewrites it. And then the day fast forwards through, and at the end of the day, where his cardboard is covered with a ton of coins and dollars, the woman comes walking back across the plaza. And when she walks back, he grabs her shoe and says, what did you do to my sign? And she says, I didn't change anything. I just changed the words. And instead of saying, I'm blind, please help me, his sign now says, it's a beautiful day and I can't see it. As we change our words, we do change lives. We change how we can approach things. We change, why is there so much poverty? How come people are hungry? Why are children suffering? Why do kids beg? To, how about I work at a soup kitchen? What education can I get so that I could administer immunizations? Where can I go to earn money so that I can travel and help people in developing countries? If we ask the how instead of the why, we can change lives. At the beginning of this speech, I shared a simple little story of a girl donating a purple dress. What was the impact of her one choice? The simple act of putting a worn out dress in a box that traveled across the world to a remote village that was based on extreme poverty. Well, 2 years passed, and my oldest daughter and I traveled over to the Philippines with the documentary film company. We ended up in a village called Legazpi City, a village we had never been to before. As we walked down the street, a girl darted in front of us, and my daughter grabbed my arm and said, Mom, that's Jerica's purple dress. Nonsense, I replied. That dress shipped 2 years ago. Mom, it is her dress. We chased after the girl. We stopped her. We asked her name. Grace Caballero, she said. Where did you get such a beautiful dress? I asked. Beaming, she said. 2 years ago, an angel from America shipped boxes to my village. My family was chosen to pick out items. I'd always wanted a dress to wear to church. Isn't it beautiful? And she twirled. As she twirled, tears streamed down my face. where I saw the 2 missing buttons I had sewn on 2 years earlier. I watched as we walked out to her village in the jungle, her house in the jungle, as she carefully went into her home, which was a dirt floor and a straw hut. And she hung the dress up, changed into a tank top and shorts, and simply put on a tank top that allowed her to shimmy up a tree and chop down some coconuts and feed and nourish us. I met her parents and her siblings. This story illustrates that knowing the impact our contribution has will greatly improve our capacity to serve. Where is Jerica today? Well, at the age of 24, she is running trade shows for Pearls with Purpose, and for me at speaking events. She is the star of a simple story called The Purple Dress, which was written during COVID and illustrated by 2 girls who had to leave college because of COVID and were able to graduate from college because of a graphic design project from a woman in America who was hoping to write the story of the purple dress. And who gets asked to sign this book? Not the author, the star of the book, Jerica. We need to understand that the clearer we are on the impact we will have, the greater our capacity to serve others will be. Then there's the story, but I think we're out of time. You're like,
Hey, Wendy, you're good. You're good. I do want to
keep
give
going.
folks a chance to ask some questions. I know that there's any number of logistical questions about the business model that we've got. Let me introduce real quick the other people who are on the recording.
okay.
So from our club in Walnut Creek, California, is our paella master, Shag Shagrin, and longtime friend of the club and member of the Rotary Club of Eugene Metropolitan, Heather Edwards. And Heather, I'd like for you to start us off on the questions.
Thank you, Rushton, and thank you, Wendy. My question is, how do women find out about your program, and what are qualifying circumstances or conditions for them to join your program?
In regards to those that we will train or people who want to volunteer?
Who will, well, both. Now that you mentioned it, my question was about the women who want to be trained and learn these skills.
Okay, so the training we have done synergistically with other nonprofits and with Rotarian clubs. And so Operation Underground Railroad is a well-known one. They do the rescuing. That is definitely a misconception that gets passed on to us frequently. We do not rescue. It's what I call it is we do the aftercare training, and we do not do the trauma healing. We simply do vocational training, mentorship, and we just love, and embrace the women. And so the sex traffic survivors, though, those individuals are located primarily Dominican Republic, Peru, Kenya, and there's another country. Oh my gosh, Cambodia and Thailand. And then women who are in disadvantaged situations, just, their husbands left them. We had a lot of that in Thailand with the tsunami devastation. That's situations where individuals get rescued. They learn about us through Rising Star Outreach, Operation Underground Railroad, doTERRA Healing Hands, Mentors International, Believe International. There's just a million, hundreds of thousands of nonprofits, Rotary clubs. And they learn what we do, and they say, oh, I went and saw this organization and they were doing this, you should contact them. So everything has more been not a strategic thing, but I heard about you, word of mouth. And on our website, you can find ways to be involved with volunteering. You can submit, your name. We are constantly in need because we have 72% of the sales of the products that go back to the artisans and to support the initiatives. I will tell you, which is a promising statistic, we have put ourselves out of the scholarship business and nearly out of the container business. We've only shipped probably 3 containers in the last 5 years, and those came about during COVID because the individuals are supplying their own needs. And so, yeah, right. So we don't really have to do that hand out model anymore. And then on the education level, we had partnered with several organizations for the children to be scholarshiped, into the schools, whether they were public, private, or college level or university level. And it was like, oh, I didn't apply because I have enough money for my child. And so most of the moms are supplying their kids with the educational needs. And so I love that aspect where our biggest focus for probably 8-9 years now has been the vocational training, the micro enterprise training, that hands-on curriculum development in how do you own a business? How do you not eat your inventory? How do you negotiate supply prices? How do you hire? How do you fire? How do you not hire family? Because a lot of them, you know, in their communities,
Of course.
towards their family members, and that creates many problems in and of themselves. But so yeah, so that answers.
Congratulations. Thank you so much.
So Wendy, in thinking about making something go global this way, first let's give people an avenue to seeing what these folks have created. It's pearlswithpurpose.org, right?
Correct. It is a .org. A lot of people are like, I couldn't find you. I went to pearlswithpurpose.com, and it is .org because of the 501c3. And we have genuine pearls from Philippines. We have semi-precious gemstones from India. So each country, whatever supplies they can get and have easier access to get, that's what our focus is. So Dominican Republic is Larimer. Kenya, because of COVID, is transitioned over to sewing co-ops. And so we have little hand-sewn clutch bags, and there's just different things from each country. So
Excellent. And thinking about the partnerships that you've done, to what degree has that relied on service clubs? I mean, you have an audience within Rotary for sure, but has that been kind of a main avenue? Has it been, you know, kind of one among many? How does it work?
So for Rotary particularly, so I'm a Rotarian, and so my heart is very deep with Rotary, mainly because you guys are definitely going to know this. You don't have to tell a Rotarian like the impact they're going to have because they're buying jewelry, right? Like a lot of people, they'll walk by our booth and oh, it's jewelry. You know, it's probably a direct sales thing. But Rotarians, they're like, oh, it's jewelry. I wonder who made it, right? Like they instantly go to that next question. And so being able to speak at the clubs, at the districts, at the conferences, and all of that, and being a Rotarian, seeing the impact that Rotarians make, not just with polio. I mean, Rotarians are just highly service-oriented individuals. And so through Rotary, I've spoken probably all over the 50 United States. I've gone to many district conferences. I've met individuals who were Rotarians, but they were like at aviation conferences or nursing conventions where I was as well. And they're like, oh, you're a Rotarian? Oh, well, come speak at my club in Texas, or come speak at the pecan plantation, or come, you know. And so I think it's just that law of attraction. You learn that, you know, there's a club going on here. You go visit them for lunch or for breakfast and just share a bit about what you do, and you all of a sudden have a partnership going.
Well, really nice. Well, what I'd like to do is I'd like to wind us down, and then I'll hand it back to you for the final words. But all of you who have been with us this week, watching this recording, learning about Pearls with Purpose, let us know what you think. There is a discuss section at the bottom of the page where you can leave a thought or respond to other people's thoughts. That goes towards the program, as well as any of the elements of the meeting you might find. There's also an attendance form that'll allow you to let us know that you were part of it, which is great for us, just getting a sense of what our reach might be. And for visiting Rotarians, by properly filling that out, which is mostly a function of properly spelling your email address, you'll get an email that is generated that you can pass along to your club secretary to make up a miss for your own meeting. As we always like to do, we hand it back to our speaker for the final words. So, Wendy, what would you like for people to have on mind as they leave the recording?
You know, I would love for them to have on mind. How long do I have to answer this question? Can I answer it in 2 minutes?
Yeah.
Oh, sweet. Okay. So instead of be the change, like a Gandhi thing, I would love to share with you just a final quick story of Lanny. And I only want to share it with you because of the impact it had on my own life and the motivation it allowed me to have during my own times of trial. It was the gift of unconditional love. Lanny is our director in Philippines. She is mom. She's got a child, just one. These are some of her nieces and nephews here and her mother. And at the age of 38, when we opened up in India, which was in 2010, we arrived at leprosy-afflicted Baratapuram colony, being told by the vice president's daughter, who had spearheaded the trip, that we would probably have 1 to 10 women to train who would actually show up. Well, we had 183. And in desperation and being alone and with one other trainer, I called Lanny in the Philippines and said, how quick could you come to India and help me with almost 200 women in training? And she said, I'll get a flight tonight. And so she made arrangements for her then 2-year-old son and her husband and her mother, who she caretook for, she's passed away. And she flew out to India, never been there before, and arrived at 2 a.m. By the time we got back out to the leprosy colony, it was 5 a.m. We had to get up at 7 a.m. to drive an hour and a half out to the leprosy colony. And we didn't have much time to talk or engage about India and what was going to happen. And she simply just got down and she sat and squatted and taught and held hands and shared tools and loved these women with every ounce of her little 5'2" self. And she just didn't stop. And we got done at 5:30 and we're transported back to our hostel and we're laying on our mats and we're hot, sweaty messes. And she turns to me and she said, Wendy, when do I die from the leprosy? And I said, what? She said, I know now I've touched their hands. I have this disease. I just want to know how much longer I have with my son. And I said, Lanny, you're not going to die. She goes, oh, this whole day long, I thought I would have this and I would surely die. I'm so glad I can now raise my son. And my eyes were just open to a stranger's willingness to just drop her entire life, her entire future for complete strangers in another country. This is true unconditional love. This is why our world is now on tilt with all the vitriol on social media. We are all mindful and ever more mindful that we do need to extend a little more kindness and gentleness and understanding towards each other and to everyone we interact with, because it has been said in songs, in poems, in scriptures all over the world that we all need to love unconditionally. And I have never met with an individual who loves as unconditionally as Lanny did in that moment, where she was willing to sacrifice self. And so I would just ask all of us as Rotarians, do we take love demands seriously? Poetry, love songs are all about the eternal perspective of love. But love, to me, love is an action word. It's a verb. It requires doing, not just saying, not just thinking, not just, floating around in bubbles about it. It requires doing. It should be reserved in its most sacred and highest space for us, for how we interact with each other. And I would just ask, do we occupy that space with the reverence and power that it deserves and lift each other from where we stand? And that's what I would share with Rotarians, is to really embrace and step into the power of love.
A beautiful story. Everyone, we will see you next week.